There is a truth that people rarely say out loud when someone goes silent. The person you believe you lost may not have stopped thinking about you. But while you search for evidence outside yourself, an unread message, a missed call, a story view, a sudden sign, the answer may have been pressing against your inner world for weeks. Pause for a moment. Do not listen to this as background noise. What we are about to explore is not cheap comfort. It is an examination of the mind, yours and possibly theirs. Some of it may hurt before it brings relief. But if you stay with it, you may begin to see the silence differently. Think about the last message that never arrived, the call that was never made, the look in their eyes that suddenly seemed to disappear. Hold that moment in your mind. That memory is the doorway. By the end of this, you may look back at that same scene with less panic and more clarity. Not because you will receive a guarantee about what they feel, but because you will understand what silence can mean and what it cannot prove. Freud believed that very little in the human mind happens by accident. A withheld word, a sudden withdrawal, an unexplained distance. These can be visible signs of an invisible conflict happening underneath. One of the names Freud gave to this process was repression. Sometimes a person pulls away not because they felt nothing, but because they felt too much, too quickly, too deeply. Their defenses may activate before they can make sense of what is happening inside them. They may not know how to hold the intensity of attachment, vulnerability, desire, or fear. And that is the part most people miss. When someone retreats immediately after emotional closeness, it does not automatically mean they are escaping you. They may be trying to escape what the connection awakened in them, something they did not realize was still alive inside. Look honestly at your own life. How many times have you backed away from something you secretly wanted? How often have you damaged something good because part of you associated love with the danger of losing it? Maybe you have pushed away someone you cared about because caring made you feel exposed. Maybe you have delayed a message because the possibility of being ignored felt unbearable. Maybe you have acted detached because attachment felt too risky. If you recognize yourself in that, then you already understand something important. The person you believe you lost may be caught in a maze that is painfully familiar to you. Write silence in the comments if you recognize this pattern. What people often refuse to admit is that silence can hurt more than a confession. It may feel easier to keep emotions buried than to say, "This matters to me more than I know how to handle," because saying it out loud means surrendering control. It means risking rejection. It means allowing another person to see the vulnerable parts that have been hidden for years, sometimes since childhood. And that brings us to one of Carl Jung's most powerful ideas, the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is the part of us we reject, hide, deny, or refuse to include in the image we present to the world. It contains the traits, needs, fears, longings, and imperfections that do not fit the version of ourselves we want others to see. When someone falls deeply for another person, the shadow can become intensely activated. Why? Because real love asks us to reveal what we usually conceal. It asks us to let someone see our uncertainty, our wounds, our fear of not being enough, our need to be chosen. For a person who has spent years building emotional walls, that kind of exposure can feel threatening, so they retreat, not necessarily because they do not care, but because caring forces them to face the parts of themselves they have spent a long time avoiding. This is where the pattern can become confusing. The deeper the feeling, the greater the fear may become. And the greater the fear becomes, the more extreme the urge to run can appear. This is not empty theory. It is a pattern that shows up repeatedly in human relationships. People do not always run from those who mean nothing to them. Sometimes they run from the people who matter enough to touch an old wound. But do not confuse protection with indifference. Indifference does not build a wall. It simply does not invest enough energy to build anything at all. Protection is different. Protection creates distance, rules, coldness, avoidance, and high emotional barriers because something inside feels valuable, dangerous, or both. Your wounded mind may read a fortress as if it were an abandoned cemetery. It may look at silence and immediately decide, they do not love me anymore. That conclusion can feel easier than uncertainty. The mind often prefers a painful certainty over an unanswered question. Even a false answer can seem safer than floating inside the anxiety of, "I do not know." Your brain may tell you, "It is over," simply because not knowing feels unbearable. That is self-protection, but sometimes it becomes self-sabotage. Uncertainty does not always mean loss. Sometimes it means process. Sometimes it means another person is fighting an internal conflict you cannot see. You may sense it, but you cannot control it, and you should be careful not to turn your own fear into a story about what their silence absolutely means. This is where another Freudian concept becomes important: transference. Transference happens when we place old wounds, fears, and relationship patterns onto someone in the present. Often, those patterns began much earlier, in childhood or in past relationships. If someone left you before, your nervous system may interpret distance as abandonment, even when the current situation is not identical. If you were once ignored, you may feel rejected by a delay. If love was inconsistent in your past, silence in the present may feel like proof that history is repeating itself. That means part of the pain you feel today may not belong entirely to this relationship. Some of it may belong to an older wound that this situation has reopened. As uncomfortable as that can be, it is also freeing. It means your current emotions are not necessarily a prophecy about the future. They may be an echo of the past, wearing the clothes of the present. And the other person may be caught in their own transference too. Perhaps someone loved them and then hurt them. Perhaps someone clung to them so tightly that love began to feel suffocating. Perhaps they were abandoned at the exact moment they were most vulnerable. Without fully realizing it, they may be replaying that old script with you. Only now, they are the one leaving first, before they can be hurt again. That does not excuse poor communication. It does not make silence harmless. But it can explain why silence is not always the same thing as a lack of love. Sometimes, silence is fear that has not learned how to speak. And fear that is poorly managed often disguises itself as detachment. This is one of the most painful paradoxes of human attachment. People can behave against what they truly want, not because they do not want it, but because wanting it feels terrifying. We can desire what frightens us. We can fear the very thing we long for most. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever done the opposite of what you felt because your feelings were too intense? Have you ever pushed away someone you loved? Not because they no longer mattered, but because they mattered so much that you felt fragile, exposed, or easy to hurt. If your answer is yes, then you do not need much more proof that this mechanism can exist on the other side too. But there is another layer: emotional ambivalence. Ambivalence is the capacity to love and fear the same person at the same time. It is not necessarily hypocrisy. It is human complexity. A person may think about you every night and still panic at the thought of writing to you. They may miss your voice, and in the same instant fear everything your voice might awaken in their chest. They may want closeness while also fearing what closeness will demand from them. This is why some people appear contradictory. They watch your stories but do not reach out. They appear, then disappear. They move closer, then freeze. They seem warm one day and distant the next. It can feel like a game, especially when you are the one left waiting. But it may be a mind trapped in conflict, the desire to approach pulling in one direction, and the instinct to escape pulling in another. Freud described the psyche through the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is raw desire. It is the part that wants to text you at 3 a.m. just to hear your voice again. The superego is the inner judge. It says, do not look weak, do not reveal too much, do not risk being hurt again, do not lose control. And the ego stands between them, trying to manage the conflict. When desire and fear collide with equal force, the ego can become paralyzed. The result is inaction. No message, no explanation, no decision, just silence. That silence may not always be the absence of desire. Sometimes it is an internal civil war where desire loses for the moment, not because desire is weak, but because fear is louder. But listen carefully. Inner conflicts are not fixed forever. The balance between desire, fear, the id, the ego, and the superego, shifts with time, circumstances, memories, loss, and unexpected events. What looks like an unbreakable wall today can weaken when life forces a person to confront themselves without an escape route. This is not a promise that someone will come back. It is simply how the psyche often works. Repression is difficult to maintain indefinitely. What is pushed down has a way of trying to rise again, even when the conscious mind resists it. And guilt can become one of the forces that breaks through. Guilt is quiet, but it can be extremely powerful. When someone distances themselves from a person they care about, they may not only feel fear, they may also feel guilt, and that guilt can grow with every day of silence. Each day without a message may not be a day of indifference. It may be another day of pressure building inside someone who knows, somewhere beneath their defenses, that they are avoiding something important. Human beings are not built to carry endless emotional pressure without some kind of consequence. Eventually, something may interrupt the defense. A song, a place, a date, a dream, a conversation with someone else, or simply the exhaustion of holding too much emotional weight in secret. And in that moment, what has been repressed can rise with an intensity that surprises even the person feeling it. Silence that once looked permanent may suddenly become impossible to sustain. No one can suppress meaningful emotion forever without paying a cost. Sooner or later, repression often demands an outlet. Sometimes that outlet is honesty. Sometimes it is a message. Sometimes it is a difficult conversation. Sometimes it is simply a private realization that can no longer be ignored. Write truth in the comments if this feels familiar. But this is not only about them, it is also about you. You may have spent days or even weeks replaying every conversation, searching for the exact sentence that ruined everything, looking for the gesture that changed the atmosphere, trying to identify the precise moment the connection broke. That obsessive search has a name: the need for control. The mind hates uncertainty so much that it may prefer blaming itself over accepting that some things are outside its control. It can feel easier to say, "I ruined it," than to admit, "I do not know what is happening inside them." You may have been blaming yourself for something that has little or nothing to do with you. The other person may be fighting a conflict that started long before they met you. And there is an even more uncomfortable truth. Sometimes we use suffering to keep a connection alive. As long as it hurts, the relationship still feels present in the mind. As long as we are grieving, analyzing, waiting, and wondering, the other person still has a place in our emotional world. Letting go of the pain can strangely feel like losing the last remaining piece of them. But pain is not proof of love. Sometimes it is attachment to pain wearing the mask of love. You need to learn the difference if you want to leave this emotional maze with clarity rather than more confusion. There is also something that can happen after a deep bond: unconscious resonance. This does not have to be magical or destined. It can simply be the result of a powerful emotional attachment leaving traces in the mind and body. Memories create patterns. Associations form. A song, a street, a time of night, a familiar phrase, or an ordinary routine can activate thoughts of someone without permission. That is why two people may continue thinking about each other even during silence. You know what it feels like on your side: the late-night thoughts, the sudden memory before sleep, the urge to check for a message that is not there. And it is possible that something similar is happening on the other side, even if no one says it aloud. But admitting that inner connection can feel dangerous, because once you admit it matters, you may feel responsible to act on it. And acting means taking a risk. Taking a risk means becoming vulnerable again to pain that has already been felt before. That is why many people remain in the familiar ambiguity of silence instead of facing the uncomfortable clarity of an honest conversation. But ambiguity has a limit. It cannot always be sustained indefinitely without creating emotional strain in the person who carries it. And when that strain finally reaches its limit, it often pushes a person toward truth rather than toward complete forgetting. Consider something else. Every time someone avoids contacting you, they may still be having conversations with you in their own mind. They may be writing messages they never send, imagining reunions that never happen, arguing with you internally, replaying old scenes with an intensity that can feel stronger than the conversations you actually shared. Distance is not always detachment. Sometimes it is preoccupation disguised as distance. The longer someone avoids a person they genuinely care about, the greater the inner pressure can become. That does not mean the outcome is guaranteed to be a perfect romantic return. It means prolonged repression tends to produce consequences. It often creates movement in one direction or another, toward honesty, toward closure, toward confrontation, toward truth. And this is where your own work matters most. You cannot control what the other person decides to do with their inner process. You cannot force them to confront their fear, their guilt, their past, or their defenses. But you can decide how you will meet your own. Stop begging the outside world for clarity and begin building clarity within yourself. As long as you wait for a sign to confirm your worth, you abandon the one certainty that matters most, your own value. Your worth does not depend on whether they return. Your peace should not be held hostage by another person's silence, no matter how deep the connection felt. This does not mean you must kill hope. It does not mean you have to pretend you never cared. It means you cannot put your entire life on pause while waiting for an answer that is not in your hands. You can still hope and continue living. You can miss someone and still heal. You can believe the connection mattered while refusing to abandon yourself for it. That is emotional maturity. And sometimes, something changes in the other person when they no longer feel they have complete control over your waiting. When they sense, even unconsciously, that you are moving forward, recovering, and rebuilding your life, a deeper fear may awaken, the fear of truly losing you, not just in fantasy, but in reality. This is not manipulation. It is a reality of human desire. We often value more deeply what we realize may not remain available forever. We may take for granted what we assume will always be waiting for us. But now, we need to face the most difficult truth in this entire situation. The reason this silence has hurt so much may not be only about this person. They may represent something much larger inside your emotional history. They may represent the possibility of being loved without conditions, the possibility that someone will finally stay, the hope that old wounds can finally be repaired. That is why this hurts so deeply. You are not grieving only them. You may also be grieving every time someone left without explanation, every time you felt you were not enough, every earlier silence that never fully healed. This situation may have opened a door that was already slightly open inside you, waiting to be faced. And here is the truth that breaks down every defense. You cannot fully heal this wound by waiting for another person to close it for you. They may return, they may explain, they may choose to heal beside you, but the root of your pain cannot depend entirely on their decision. That work belongs to you. It belongs to your willingness to face the full story this situation has exposed, your patterns, your fears, your longing to be chosen, your old grief, and the parts of yourself you have avoided looking at. And this is what makes you stronger than you realize. The moment you stop needing someone else to confirm your value, the moment you stop waiting for an external sign to feel whole, life can begin to move in directions you never expected. You do not have to stop loving. You do not have to erase hope, but hold hope from strength, not desperation. Everything changes when you stop begging and begin living with dignity, even in uncertainty. Write dignity in the comments if you are choosing yourself again. Before we end, there is one more layer to understand: cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance happens when a person holds two contradictory beliefs at the same time. The mind struggles to tolerate the conflict, so it starts reshaping reality until both beliefs seem easier to live with. Imagine someone who believes they love you, yet continues to move away from you. Their mind has to somehow explain that contradiction. Often, the easiest explanation is not, "I am afraid." Instead, they may begin telling themselves, "Maybe it was not that important. Maybe it is better this way. Maybe enough time has passed. Maybe what I felt is gone." These stories can help the mind survive the contradiction for a while, but they are not always permanent truths. They can be temporary patches laid over a foundation that is still trembling underneath. And whenever something breaks through that artificial story, a memory, a song, a date, a dream, a place, a moment of loneliness, the buried feeling can return with an intensity that surprises them. That helps explain why some people return after months of complete silence, even after convincing themselves they had moved on. The unconscious does not negotiate with the stories the conscious mind creates to survive. Eventually, it asks to be heard. No artificial narrative can permanently carry the weight of a connection that remains alive underneath. No distraction, no new interest, no routine created to fill the empty space can always erase what has not truly been processed. And there is another wound that can live beneath the silence: the fear of deserving. Many people carry a quiet belief they rarely say aloud: I do not deserve something this good. When they encounter love that feels too real, too deep, too healing, that wound can become activated. A mind shaped by disappointment, abandonment, or earlier pain may begin sabotaging what the heart actually wants, not because the person is weak, because an old scar is trying to protect itself from the possibility of a new wound. Understanding this can change the way you interpret silence. It may stop feeling like pure rejection and begin to look more like an internal battle between the desire to stay and the fear of not being enough to sustain what is real. But be honest with yourself. Do you carry that wound too? Do you seek from another person the validation you need to begin building inside yourself? Because the desperate search for outside certainty can sometimes be the very thing that keeps you from the inner certainty you need most. Real transformation does not begin only when someone returns. It begins when you no longer need them to return in order to feel complete. And it is often from that place of inner strength that life takes its most unexpected turns. So remember this: people who truly care cannot always hold silence forever, not because fate guarantees a particular ending, and not because every story becomes a reunion, but because the human psyche struggles to repress what matters indefinitely. Eventually, something may crack, something may surface, something may finally be spoken. Do not give up on yourself, but do not freeze your life while you wait. Keep living, keep healing, keep building your own clarity. If this connection is as real as it feels to you, silence may not be the final chapter. It may simply be the darkest part before a turn neither of you expected. And if the turn does not arrive in the form you hoped for, remember something even more important. You will not be the same person who began listening to this. You will understand more about your mind, your patterns, your wounds, and your capacity to face what you once avoided. And no matter what the other person decides, that understanding is already a victory no one can take from you. Because your deepest transformation was never meant to depend on someone coming back. It depended on you finally becoming willing to look directly at what you had been afraid to see. Write ready in the comments if you are choosing clarity over waiting.